All right, welcome back to Justin and Donald Save America, where we uncover the hidden threats shaping our future, expose the hidden agendas behind them, and arm you with the truth. Today, we're talking about a handful of very interesting topics, everything from the big European ESG law, the csddd, and whether or not that's on its deathbed. And then we're also going to take a look into the recent socialism conference that took place this summer in Chicago.
Hilarious.
Yes, we've got a bunch of videos that we're going to break down, and I warned Justin because you haven't watched these videos.
No, I'm so excited.
Some of them are just out of this world. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that and more on this episode of Justin and Donald Save America. Audience, for those that are tuning in for this for the first time, hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't. All those things help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. But like I said, we try to find those emerging issues, those big threats that are on the peripheries, maybe people aren't paying attention to, and we bring them to the forefront and talk about them right here on this show. So one of the things that we've talked about a million times, if you've watched our content before, is the concept of ESG. Anyone that's been watching our stuff should probably be pretty familiar with ESG. That's short for environmental, social, governance metrics. It's essentially a corporate social credit score. Doesn't measure how well a company serves its customers, how efficient it is, or how profitable the business is. Instead, it punishes businesses that don't fall in line with certain political and ideological agendas. So it elevates compliance with activist-driven standards over market-driven success. So it warps the entire economy. We've got so much stuff on ESG. We've been working on that for literally years, 5 years maybe, Justin.
I don't know. It feels like forever.
It does feel like forever. When we originally identified this as a major threat, we referred to it as like a backdoor to socialism or a backdoor to collectivism. Later, we labeled it 21st century fascism. And ESG metrics include stuff relating to climate change, CO2 emissions, land use, energy use, social things like labor ratios of different ethnic groups in your corporation. There's just a million different things. So we've been waging war on ESG for, like I said, 5+ years, and we've had some major success, but like we were on like the precipice there. Like if our country and the world went full bore into like the ESG system, I mean, we would be like unrecognizable in a few more years, right? But we've been pushing back against it, so much so that a lot of other people started pushing back against it, and we've beaten it back pretty significantly here in the United States. However, like any scheme that's getting pushed by the globalist elite types, they don't just give up. They just pivot. They'll, swap in a different name and just try it from a different angle. So in recent years, the biggest battleground when it came to ESG has actually been in Europe. So over there, bureaucrats pushed forward the so-called Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or csddd. Think of it as ESG on steroids. It's a sweeping regulation that would force companies to police their entire global supply chains for things like climate goals, labor practices, sustainability, what have you. In practice, this means endless compliance costs, crushing smaller competitors, and giving unelected regulators enormous leverage over businesses worldwide, and that's including in the United States. I know sometimes people hear European Union, they're just whatever, don't care. But the way that this law was made, structured, it directly impacts basically all business across the world, including here in the United States. So we were literally some of the only people that identified this as an emerging threat coming out of Europe. And like with ESG, we sounded the alarm as best we could, so much so that others started talking about it, so much so that the word of this threat traveled all the way up to the ears of the Trump administration. So, Justin, why don't you take it from here? Do we get to spike the football on the demise of the csddd, or what's the latest when it comes to the scheme out of Europe?
Yeah, so one of the big challenges for this thing that we've been talking about, I think I went back at one point and found that we actually put this in our book The Great Reset at one point is a section in the book. I'm pretty sure that's there. That was a book that we published at the beginning of 2022 with Glenn Beck, and I think that's how far back, at least that part of it. We wrote that in 2021 with Glenn, so I mean, it goes back to at least 2021. It's taken 4 years to get to this point, but we knew even back then the biggest problem with this was it was this ingenious scheme that they cooked up in the European Union to impose ESG on companies all throughout the world. And the only way that you could avoid it really was if the companies, the largest companies that would be the people directly, or the companies that directly fall underneath the law, like these are your big corporations like Apple and, Starbucks and McDonald's and Ford, these kinds of really big international companies. The only way that you could stop it is if they just didn't do business in the European Union anymore.
Right.
Like that was the choice that was being given to them. Like you either have to do what we're telling you and then impose it on all these business partners you have all over the world. Even if they don't do business in the EU, you have to impose these values on them too, which is how some small, business in America could get caught up in it, even if they're not operating in the EU and fall under the guidelines of the csddd. That was one of the only ways. The other way was if you had an American president or Congress, but you would require the president to some degree, basically say, we're going to have a trade war with the European Union, and then tell them, no, we're not doing this. This is the only two options. And at the time that we were working on all of this, of course, 2021 was most of the initial research of this. That's the beginning of Joe Biden. That's right. First year Joe Biden's in office. So think about how inconceivable that option seemed. What seemed impossible, right? Big corporations had bought all in on the Davos Great Reset stuff. They love the European Union and they want to do business in the European Union. I mean, Davos is literally in the European Union. And you have and then you have Joe Biden, a pro Great Reset president. As president, he's not going to do any of that. He's not going to have a trade war with the EU. Like, that was totally absurd. So it really did seem, in my mind, like we had all these domestic battles we had to fight on ESG, but I always knew that was in the background.
Yeah.
This massive, a Leviathan that we would never be able to beat without basically like a miracle happening, right? Even most Republican presidents, I would argue, wouldn't do what you would need to fight that. Like George W. Bush wouldn't have done that, So it seemed very unlikely we were going to win. And that was part of the reason why, like when you and I were working on the second book in the Great Reset series with Glenn about the technocracy and how technology was going to be used with ESG to control people. And that was all related to this stuff too. I believe we talked about CSDDD in that book also. Sure. We called it Dark Future because it didn't seem like a very bright future ahead of us. It's a big part of it. So all of that is the context within which we get this new statement that comes out. Trump becomes president, obviously, in this year. And one of the very first things he decides to do is start trade wars with a whole bunch of different entities all over the world, countries, and the European Union was part of that. And the center of the media focus on the trade war stuff has always been tariff rates and those kinds of things. That's what's getting the headlines. But one of the big things that was part of those negotiations from the start that most people were not paying attention to was this EU ESG scheme that Donnie mentioned earlier. That was all part of the negotiations, and we knew it because we had heard news reports that they were trying to talk about this, and that this was one of their big complaints. We had the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick had talked about the CSDDD. We knew that Congress, we had worked with members of certain congressional offices, so we knew they were focused on it, and that there was some pressure being pushed there. There were letters written by different congressional committees and those kinds of things saying something needs to be done. They sent that to the president, talked about how trade was one of the ways that this could be accomplished, stopping the CSDDD. But we didn't know what was going to happen. And then the EU and the United States struck a trade deal. And we didn't know for sure what was in it even then, because we didn't get the details. So then just about a week ago, the detailed framework, and it's not super detailed, but the details of a more detailed framework was officially released by Brussels and by the United States. This is our deal. This is essentially what they're saying. And in it, it's not getting any headlines, but this is a massive, massive, massive story. It's just not getting any headlines. Is point number 12 here on the screen. If you're watching the video version of the show on YouTube, you'll see this. That very clearly says that the European Union is committing to ensure that the csddd and this other law that's kind of related to it, the CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, do not pose undue restrictions on transatlantic trade. In the context of CSDDD, that's the EU ESG law, this includes undertaking efforts to reduce administrative burden on businesses, including small and medium-sized enterprises, and to propose changes to the requirement for a harmonized civil liability regime for due diligence failures and to climate transition-related obligations. That's kind of like a fancy way of saying we're going to take the teeth out of this thing so that you can actually punish people for it. The European Union commits to work to address U.S. concerns regarding the imposition of CSDDD requirements on companies of non-EU countries with relevant high-quality regulations. So they're not saying we're going to completely get rid of it, but they're basically saying we're going to gut it of most of its force. This is a massive concession on the part of the EU. It's incredibly embarrassing because when we first started talking about it in 2021-ish, it was not a law. It was something that they were working on. And it took them like 3 years to make it a law. So from 2021, or 4 years, right? 2021, 2022, 2023, into 2024, they were working on this. It was working its way through the EU's bureaucratic lawmaking system. Okay. It takes that long to pass a law sometimes in the EU. And then in 2024, it officially became law. So it wasn't until 2024. So it's only been a year that this thing has been a law. And now they're already saying, you know what? We agree to go back to the drawing board and we'll have to pass a new law that guts the old law that we just spent years putting together. Why? Because they know that Donald Trump and the whole U.S. really economy is much more powerful and much more important, and that they're throwing their weight around and they're not going to agree to it. And when they wrote it, they thought Joe Biden or someone like Joe Biden was going to be president. And now that he's not, they have to gut the whole thing. And so this is a massive embarrassment. Tons of political capital. You and I watched this very closely, how this whole thing played out. Tons of political capital wasted in the European Union fighting over this. And it shows very, very clearly that, I think we dodged a bullet. B, it shows that America is much more powerful than Europe still. And C, it shows that if you have a U.S. president that's actually willing to put the American people first, no matter how big of an entity, because the European Union is the second most powerful group of countries in the world, second most powerful political entity in the world, I would argue. And it caved pretty fast because you had an American president stand up and say, nope, we're not doing this. And so this is a massive victory for the American people and American businesses and for freedom, because the whole point of this was to undermine freedom and force us to become more like Europe. That was the whole point of the system. And we now don't have to worry about it, at least while Donald Trump or someone who has that kind of mindset is president of the United States. So huge, huge win.
Yeah, I've said this before when we talked about this, and again, just this idea that like this is happening in Europe. It's like snooze. We got a whole bunch of stuff going on over here. It's like, no, trust me, it's going to impact us over here. Like, I just wonder how much of the strategy was, this is just going to fly under the radar. Like, no one's going to really pay attention. And some of like the bigger companies over there, they're in support of all of this stuff. They're going to have to do ESG stuff over there anyways. So if they're going to be compliant with ESG, they're going to be compliant with CSDD. Like, it'll all be fine. And then, we raise as big of a stink about it as we can. This gets attention. Something's done about it. But like I said in the intro of all of this, like a scheme this big, and we identified ESG as being kind of their backdoor way of doing all of these different political things that they've been wanting to do for decades, if not more. They're not just gonna, like, all right, well, that's it. Donald Trump's president. I guess we're leaving and we're gonna go back to free markets. Like, is this just like a temporary a success here? Like, as soon as Donald Trump's out of office, or people like Donald Trump are out of office, maybe somebody with a D in front of their name gets elected, 4 years from now, whatever. Are they just gonna turn those teeth back on? Is they gonna like double down on this idea? What do you think?
100%.
Okay.
This is a I think there's a few things here that are really or two things in particular are really telling. They're not they're gutting it, but they're not repealing the whole thing.
Sure.
And I think one of the reasons they want to do that is you want to keep obviously they don't want the political embarrassment to be even bigger by just getting rid of the whole thing. But I actually think the biggest reason is because they want to make sure the framework is still there.
Right.
And so all they have to do is tweak it, rather than let's go through this whole gigantic battle again of creating this whole framework. The framework will be there. It just won't be very useful for what they're trying to do. But then as soon as they get a president in America that's willing to cooperate with them, then they're going to just flip the switch again and say, you know what, let's revise this law. And it might take them a year or two to do that because everything over there moves like incredibly slow. But then they will turn this whole thing back on, this gigantic machine. So, this is an authoritarian machine. That's what it is. And they're not going to deconstruct it. They're just not going to put any gasoline in it. And they're going to let it sit there with a sheet over it in the garage for a while until they have the conditions where they can turn it back on and really get this thing roaring. And so this is not a battle that's over. I still believe that the Great Reset model, even though they've abandoned that framework because they're terrified to use the language, in ESG, they're abandoning that because they're terrified to use the language. You're welcome, America. And CSDDD, they're going to turn this thing off for right now and gut it because they're terrified of making Trump angry and having to pay even higher tariffs. But the plan is still, I think, the plan because it's such a good plan. And there's no other way for them to do what they want to do. This is the best way to do it. So I think this is going to be the way forward.
Right. Yeah. This machine that you describe, like, it has been being built for a long time. They're not just going to scrap it, like you said. Nope. And I've said before that I think that, like, the whole ESG thing that we were dealing with in the United States was just like the foundation on which things like this would be built. Because when we did all the ESG stuff and sounding the alarm on that, and we actually like ran into a lot of resistance on our side of the political aisle. People be like, well, it's just, people doing voluntary things. This isn't mandated by government. And we'd be like, no, actually it is very coercive and all of this different things going on. But this is coercive. This is straight from the government. Like, this is mandated version of ESG imposed by the European body that affects all of us here. And like I said earlier, it's like, all of these companies in the US are already putting together their ESG reports. They're already, keeping track of, reporting on all of these things that relate to all these ESG metrics. And I just I just feel like that was just the setup for when it becomes mandatory, and whether it's being mandated by the US government or the European Union in our globalized system, it really doesn't matter. So yeah, I think they're one and the same. They're hooked into each other. And it's part of that Great Reset system that's they've been thinking of for a long time. And no, they're not just going to be like, all right, well, we tried. Goodbye. Let's try something else. Like,
and the thing is,
in the future,
every like we'll use a pop culture Star Wars reference because because we love those, and so people are going to have to endure it if they don't. But one of the criticisms of the Star Wars franchises generally is that there's this sense that the plot always seems to fall somewhere around or adjacent to building this one gigantic kind of super weapon that can destroy planets. Sure. And it's like, well, can't they come up with something different? Like, this is the same plot over and over and over again. And I've always thought to myself, like, I get why people think that's cheap writing.
Uh-huh.
But in reality, that is how things work. Like, if you actually could build a super weapon that could just wipe out whole planets, you would just keep doing that over and over and over again until you had nothing. Why would you give up on that and be like, you know what? Forget this super weapon planet killer thing. We're going to go to a different idea, a different scheme. It's like, no, you just keep doing that until it works.
Right.
And that's what this is. Like, this is the most ingenious way that elites have ever come up with, in Europe especially, of imposing their will on the rest of the world. This is the best plan they've ever come up with. This is their Death Star plan. And they're not just going to, throw it into the trash can because some rebels came along and blew up one of the Death Stars. It's like, they still know how to build Death Stars. They're going to keep building more Death Stars. It's not going to end here. And the other thing to remember is they know this, and all Americans should know this. And this is really the worst. I think one of the great weaknesses on the right at this point in time is people feel so good on the right about Trump's efforts to do this kind of stuff that they have been lulled into a false sense of security about it. Right. It's almost as though they forget that Donald Trump already served one term in office. He only gets 3 more years. And then Donald Trump is gone. No matter what, no matter how good he's done or how popular he is, he's not going to be president. And there's someone else will be president, and it might be a Democrat. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not, and it's JD Vance or somebody, and he's not going to go along with all this crap, fine. But do we really believe on the right? Are we really so delusional to believe that we're just going to go through like a Roosevelt era here or something, FDR era, where we get Democrat presidents for like 20 something straight. I mean, Republican presidents for 20 something straight years in a row who don't like this kind of stuff. No, obviously that's not going to happen. So the time will come fairly soon. I don't know when, even if it's 8 years from now, the time will come when Democrats get their person in the office and they are going to be frantically trying to put all this infrastructure back into place, and they'll be all too willing to allow the EU. Yeah, rev the engines up, and the EU is going to be a big part of that because Donald Trump's deconstructing a lot of it here domestically, but in the EU, it's all still there. And this is just the way this is going to work. So I would love to believe that we are not going to have to fight this battle, and there was a period of time where you and I were like, I used to think, maybe we just will, we're going to move on to something else at some point. I'm not so sure now. This might be our, like, we might have to deal with this literally for like the next 20 years. And this is just, unfortunately, the cards we've been dealt is like having to deal with this crap. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a good call. So like in a few years, if you hear us talking about this same old thing or referring to this because now it's got a different name or something along those lines, don't be too surprised. But this is like a strategy, this idea of like Europe mandating something that if anyone does any business in the European Union, you got to fit with our regulations, and that resulting in all of these companies having to change their way of operations, all of that is like a strategy that we're actually seeing, like a reoccurring strategy. Another thing, and we're not going to get into this specifically on this episode, but like the AI Act out of Europe is very similar. This idea that if any of these AI companies that are all mostly in the United States are going to have their product being used or whatever in European Union, you got to make sure to have these certain restrictions or ideological biases encoded into your AI. We're actually working on a kind of a big paper on that here at the Heartland Institute. But that'll be a topic for another episode.
Yeah.
But I do like talking about artificial intelligence, so I want to jump into our next topic here. So I'm going to base it off of this article that just recently got published in The Blaze, authored by a very handsome gentleman, that is titled "America First Energy Policy Will Be Key to Beating China in the AI Race." So in this article, I lay out basically that artificial intelligence, the defining force shaping everything from economic growth to military power, is being fueled not just by data and innovation, but by raw, relentless energy. So in this, I break down how China gets it, and they're building coal plants at breakneck speed, accounting for 95% of the world's new coal capacity in 2023. So out of all the coal power that was generated, put online in 2023, China accounted for 95% of that. They've also recently broken ground on what is being referred to as the world's largest hydroelectric dam. They've got a couple of those. There's one that's called like Three Gorges Dam. That's like massive. It's like so big that its displacement of water like slightly shifts the rotation of the planet. Apparently, they're building one that's bigger than that. So they're basically doing everything they can to generate as much electricity as possible. And I actually have this really interesting chart here. Let me see. Do you see this chart? This chart shows energy production in the world, over since 1985. And you see, it kind of going up in the United States, kind of going down in the European Union, up in India, kind of sideways in Japan and Russia here. But there's this other line that kind of cuts through all of this, right? Do you see this this line that's kind of going up? Well, you gotta kind of shift upward to see where that trajectory is going. That's China. So China is onlining just an incredible amount of energy in the past couple of decades. Incredible amount. Like I don't even know the words to describe the energy output. And what's funny
it's
is
more
that, like,
it's more than 2 United States is. I mean, think about that. More than double the US.
And it was less than the United States just in 2010. That 2010
insane.
wasn't that long
That's
ago.
just insane. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. So you'll actually hear some people using like little bits of this information to kind of push forward their narrative. This idea that China is onlining more wind and solar than anything, or than any other country. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Yeah. They're onlining everything they possibly can. It's not because they love wind and solar. They just want as much energy as possible. So they're just taking it at any way they can get it.
They're not replacing their coal and their natural gas and all that other stuff with wind and solar, which is they're using it when it makes sense, which we're fine with too. Yeah, and everyone I know is fine with that. If it makes sense, then use it.
They also don't care about like clear cutting forests to put up solar farms, or like taking off the top of a mountain to put up wind turbines,
or flooding like whole villages to build dams so they can do hydropower. They don't care about any of that. So yeah, who's going to do? We can't even build a high-speed train from Los Angeles to San Francisco with billions of dollars in like 20 years. We can't do that. But in China, they do stuff like that all the time because no one has any rights and they just impose it on everybody.
Right. And then, so back at home, environmental debates and grid fragility are slowing us down when it comes to basically anything, but also AI production. And it's not just inconvenient, it's existential. You can't innovate your way out of a blackout. You need energy. So no matter how brilliant our code is, power scarcity is going to stall the AI revolution, potentially before it has the chance to roar. So that's why I wanted to focus a little bit here on the idea of energy abundance, not arbitrary regulations, and how this should be the rallying cry in America if we really want to stay ahead of the game when it comes to artificial intelligence. And let me be very clear here. China is not producing all of that energy just to power their like AI ambitions. Much of this goes to just keeping the lights on for their massive population and sustaining their heavy industrial base. But the critical point here is that China has the energy abundance to dominate the AI race. And we know that they want to. There's multiple plays that are going on between Alibaba and DeepSeek. They definitely have AI ambitions, and they have the energy to back that up. And the other thing that I want to mention here, and I'll get, Justin, I'll let you to speak on all of this, is that there was a clip. I didn't prepare it for this episode, unfortunately, but there's a clip exists of Mark Zuckerberg talking on some podcast about artificial intelligence and how he used to think that like compute was going to be the bottleneck for developing artificial intelligence. The idea of like obtaining the processing power to actually run artificial intelligence would be like the most difficult thing. But he said that he's now realized that energy production is going to be the bottleneck. They have enough compute, they just don't have the energy enough to run it. And this has resulted in a bunch of different, plays. I think it was Microsoft was trying to buy 3 Mile Island, turn back on those nuclear plants, not to power the grid or anything, but to directly feed in their data centers to train their AI systems. Meta and X, Elon Musk's X, they are like ramping up. They're like, I think it's natural gas generators they're again not tied into the grid, just tied in directly to their data centers. So all these companies are doing whatever they can to produce as much energy as they can to keep ahead of the curve when it comes to artificial intelligence. And like Trump's energy first agenda is fantastic. There's been a ton of things that have been done so far in the Trump administration just this first year that has put us on the a good trend line to producing more energy, and not to be so like whatever, like guilty of using reliable energy.
Climate
all great
confessions.
stuff. But man, we have got to step on the gas literally when it comes to this, or else we're going to be just so outpaced by China. That chart right there that's still on the screen should shock you, it should alarm you, and it should just ring the alarm bells to say we need to catch up to China. We need to be producing tons of energy in this country to stay on target when it comes to the demand of not only artificial intelligence, but if we're going to bring back advanced manufacturing here in the United States, any other emerging technologies, all of this stuff, growing population, all of it requires massive amounts of energy. So,
That's right.
Justin, I don't think you've seen this chart before, but pretty shocking, huh?
Yeah, it's incredible. And it really is the like the lifeblood of not just economic growth, but human development is energy.
Right.
And that has only become more the case in recent decades. And AI, I mean, the thing about AI is I think a lot of people, what they imagine is they think to themselves, okay, well, so we have our current electric, grid, and we have development right now, and basically our energy production is meeting demand. And then we have AI comes in, and then AI is going to need like tons and tons and tons of electricity. And so we need more electricity to deal with AI. And if we don't, because this is the problem with that framing, it's not a problem, it's just the way people have a tendency to think, is it's like, if we don't do that electric generation, then what it means is no AI, right? But in reality, what will happen is AI will continue to get their electricity because they've got lots and lots of money, the big tech companies behind that. They'll find a way to get that electricity. They'll do whatever they have to do. They'll pay whatever they need to pay in order to get it. But then what about everything else? So if we don't dramatically expand our electricity generation, it's going to come from other areas. AI is going to eat out more and more and more of what current use is. And you're going to end up with more blackouts, more brownouts. You're going to have more problems in other sectors. Energy generation or consumption is going to become more expensive for everybody because it's going to be more scarce. There's more demand for it, right? And so everything is going to suffer if you don't do this. And AI generation will probably be hampered too. It'll all be something that occurs, right? But we've seen this play out in a whole bunch of other industries and parts of the economy where central planners, this is why central planning is so bad, and electricity generation is almost totally planned by centralized authorities in states and regions and stuff like that. It's not in any way a market-based economy, okay, when it comes to electricity. We've seen this play out in other areas. Like, for example, one of the reasons why healthcare is so expensive is because the amount of hospitals and doctors and MRI machines and services allowed in a particular area is all centralized. And they've done a terrible job of planning it for decades and decades and decades. And we have shortages in all these different areas that we shouldn't have shortages of. But one reason it's so expensive to see a doctor is because we don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough doctors because that was all centrally planned, the number of doctors we have. It was not based on market forces at all. It was determined by quotas. Okay. The same thing is true with, so you have like all sorts of the healthcare industry is that way. Housing, right? Why don't there's a huge demand for people to buy houses, yet housing is super expensive. We don't have enough housing. Why? Because of zoning laws and environmental regulations and other central, planners that came up with rules and schemes to try to limit the number of houses that are being built for a variety of different reasons. And depending on where you are, it could be to protect the environment. It could be to keep housing prices high, values high in the particular area, or to make it even higher, or whatever. But the point is that these problems have occurred. They were foreseeable 50, 60 years ago before they were problems. And there were people like us, 50, 60 years ago, there were people like us saying, hey, if you don't do something about this, this is going to be a massive crisis. And then it became a crisis because no one listened. And so we have to learn from our mistakes, because the stakes this time are even higher than they were in those battles. Because as bad as it is that housing is too expensive, and that is really bad, as bad as it is that that healthcare is too expensive, and those are two huge problems. I'm not trying to downplay that. Emerging technologies is the future of the entire history of the world is going to be shaped by this right now. It's like we're at the beginning of the original industrial revolution, or the beginning of when people started using fossil fuels and driving around in cars and having machines that are producing much of in the industrial processes. Like, we're in a key phase of that. And imagine going back in time and you're living in a place where they're putting policies into effect that make it hard for people to have cars, or make it hard for the Industrial Revolution to happen in that particular area. And no, we're going to only have an agrarian economy. We don't want machines at all. That is essentially what's going on right here. This is what this debate is all about. It would be as catastrophic as living in a place that says, we're only sticking to farms. We don't want any of your machines and your cars and all that. Just forget it. It would be like that. And it's so predictable. It was predictable back then, but there were countries that refused to modernize back then. And there are going to be countries today that refuse to increase their electric generation so that they can be competitive in these areas. And those countries, by the way, are all in Europe right now. They're all doing that in Europe. They're not doing anything. They can't be leaders in AI in Europe. Despite all the universities and educated people, they can't be, because of power generation and regulations and taxes and costs and other things. They will never be. The future of the global economy will not be centered in Europe. It is guaranteed, because of their anti-technology policies. The anti-affordable energy policies make that impossible. And so it's going to come down to a country it's going to be China. It could be America if we continue on with our or the Trump administration's pro-domestic energy production model of doing things, then it will. But if we start going back down the road of no, we need more windmills and solar panels, and we don't care if they're not as efficient as nuclear energy or whatever, we're going to do it anyway. It's we can't. The other thing that is worth bringing up in this whole conversation, something we've talked about a lot on other shows and other things we've done, is the windmill and solar panel model with AI in the mix. It was already basically impossible. 5 years ago, there were people saying, if you're actually going to try to do this, build out the entire electric grid on windmills and solar panels and hydro, you're going to have windmills and solar panels everywhere. It's going to consume all this land. It's going to be impossible. There were people saying that. We were saying that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were talking about that. But that was before we had all these projections about AI and electric generation. Right. Now it's even dumber and more inconceivable that it could ever happen. It would literally be impossible based on where we're seeing electric generation going because of emerging technologies. It will literally be impossible to run on windmills and solar panels in a country that actually is a center for AI development and use. It will literally be impossible within the next 5 to 10 years. And yet the left's policy platform is still to run on windmills and solar panels, even though they know that it's like mathematically impossible to do it with where we're headed. And the right, turns out, was right about that all along. In fact, we were even more right about it than we realized, because we didn't even foresee everything happening with AI that has now happened. So it's just like, this is such a no-brainer. It's not even an option. It's like you're either going to commit suicide economically,
Right.
or you're going to set yourself up for at least the chance to be successful. Those are your two choices here.
Right.
And that's what this chart is really illustrating if you think it through logically.
Right. Yeah. The you mentioned the idea of like, just gonna like choose to be an agrarian country or something like that. And I think that's probably a lot of people listening to this that are like, yeah, like I want to live in the woods. Like I would love to have that life. But it's like that in tandem with the other large economic power on the other side of the world being like, you know what, we're gonna definitely go into this like steam engine thing. I think there's there's a lot of potential behind that. It's like, then projected out 10 years, who's the leading force in the world? Is it your agrarian country, or is this the one that actually pursued like the Industrial Revolution?
Right.
And obviously we're pursuing artificial intelligence and all of that, but are we like providing the framework in which we can actually have that industry boom? And China is.
No.
We're not.
No. And this isn't us saying this. Like, this is the people who run the AI companies saying this. They're the ones saying, if you don't do this, we're screwed.
Larry Fink, head of BlackRock, was at a World Economic Forum event like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, talking about how there's no way that we're going to power AI with windmills and solar panels.
Mr. ESG, the guy who was the face of all of that, one of the faces of all of it.
Yeah. He's saying that flat out. We have clips of him saying that. So if that's not a warning to you, it should be. So interesting stuff. All right, Justin, should we transition into our socialism segment here?
I'm ready. I do want to set it up before you actually start playing clips of it. You can make the transition. Okay. But so in this episode of Stopping Socialism TV, in this segment of Stopping Socialism TV, the show, this is, we're going to talk about these crazy things that have been happening at the DSA conference, Democratic Socialists of America conference. They hold this conference every single year. The video clips are, I've been told, I haven't seen them yet, I'm very excited, from this past year's conference, are absolutely crazy. But the reason I'm so excited, despite having not seen them, is because we have done a lot of work on these conferences in the past, where we have these incredible clips and things that have gone on at these conferences, and they are unbelievably, they are just the most insane meetings that you could ever possibly imagine. As crazy as you think a Democratic Socialists of America conference might be, it's crazier than that. And not necessarily in the ways you're imagining. Like, if you haven't seen the clips before, you might be thinking, well, what are they saying? Like, we need to, collectivize everything. It's like, not just that kind of stuff. It's that they're crazy people, legitimately. Yeah. And the kinds of things they say to each other, the interactions, the shouting down of each other, the weird little like cultural things that have come, the snapping for agreement and stuff that they do at the conferences is beyond anything that most people would ever. It's more than I would have dreamed. And I dream quite a bit about how insane these people are. So I'm so excited about to see the clips from this year's conference.
Yeah, well, so we got a couple of clips here, but let me just set it up a little bit further. So over this past summer, the Socialists descended on Chicago for their annual Socialism Conference. So for a few days, Chicago's coffee shops were packed with Che Guevara shirts and expensive laptops covered with Smash Capitalism stickers. This conference brings together so many of just the worst people you can imagine, from the Democratic Socialists of America to the so-called revolutionaries who are literally calling for the dismantling of America. But they put together a jam-packed 4-day schedule just filled with a ton of educational panels, tons of them having to do with class struggle, Palestinian liberation, pro-abortion, climate justice, general resistance efforts, anti-fascism. Reading through the schedule, you quickly get sick of like the words solidarity and justice and abolition and colonialism and intersectionality. They're just smattered over like the majority of the panels and the descriptions. So I'm just gonna kind of scroll through here, but this is their lineup, Justin. So if there's anything that you see that you want me to like click on, we can read the description. There's tons of it. Feel free to jump in and stop me, but I'll just list off a few that I prepared.
De-escalation.
Beforehand.
Can you go up a little bit? The de-escalation one. There's one in there. Yeah, we keep us safe. De-escalation training. So is that like an anti-police one?
With growing political turbulence making the future unpredictable, now more than ever, it is crucial that we take responsibility for developing the skills and knowledge to protect our communities. This workshop is an active training in de-escalation skills for social movement activists, and all are encouraged to attend.
I don't even know what that means. Is that
Not
like
really sure.
we need to talk to people about, we know that you want to smash the patriarchy, but like don't literally smash the patriarchy, guys. Like,
Well, I don't know, because this is the speaker of this is Brian Bean, who we will see in one of our clips that we have prepared.
okay,
So,
all right, let's scroll down a little bit more.
uh,
Oh, wait,
so-
right there. AI and the techno-fascist power grab for our
yeah, I was
data,
going to point
lives, and
that one out.
resources. Wow,
Yeah, so
interesting.
tech billionaires claim AI will save us, but decades of community experience tell another story. Governments and corporations use AI to extract our data and labor and justify life and death decisions about our lives, especially Black, brown, and working class communities. Our taxes subsidize these harms as the wealthiest corporations on the planet profit. Our session will cover what's missing in debates about AI, break
God, I
down
would
the
love to
power
see that.
structures behind AI systems, and highlight opportunities for organizing and something.
That's amazing. All right, keep going down.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Art and communism. Oh my gosh. How do
Well,
we make that more attractive? Join filmmaker, rapper, and activist Boots
Boots Riley.
Riley.
Boots Riley.
Okay. Art and contemporary capitalism and what it means to be an artist on the left. All right, that's interesting.
Yeah. No, there's a ton of them. Again, stop me if you see something. But one of my favorites that I came across earlier was "What's at Stake: Organizing for Climate Armageddon." We are in the midst of a climate upheaval. The world is burning and we must act. This panel discusses what's at stake and how our side can respond to crisis. The discussion will address indigenous sovereignty, climate refugees, and the public power, and will
Hold on,
explain
wait.
why just ending fossil fuels alone is insufficient for a better world.
Hold on, scroll up just a little bit. Right there. Stop right there. So this is great. So we have at like 5:00, we've got becoming working class revolutionaries, lessons from the League of Revolutionary Black Workers for today's class war. By the way, you see almost no Black people at these conferences. I'm just going to say that. The struggle for collective liberation, class oppression, and then the politics of resistance, lessons from ACT UP from today's solidarity movements. But then at 6, welcome to happy hour. That's nice. Then at 7:30, this thing's still going on. Labor and community organizing against the MAGA billionaire agenda. So the happy hour is just a break. Then they stop at 7:30. They go to 9:30. It's radical game night.
Yes.
And then radical trivia night. That's awesome. Then we start the next morning off with yoga.
Yes, yoga to start the morning. It's a nice centering way to start the morning. I really wish they told us what the trivia was. Like, is it pop culture? Is it about socialism?
Me
I don't know.
too. Me too. You know what? This is actually, I mean, am I going to regret saying this? But this seems like a pretty great conference.
I know. I actually thought like I would want to go to this.
I kind of want to go to this. We've talked about doing that before, and then we never do, because I mean, there's a variety of reasons. We're like busy, and also like we don't want to die. But I feel like it really legitimately might be worth going, because this seems like a lot of fun. I mean, are you telling me that you wouldn't want, how many of these things, as we're just scrolling down, were you like, you know what? I'd be interested in at least peeking in to see what they've got to say. Like, I would say a lot of them, like a lot.
I only scrolled through one day so far. So there's also,
this is great.
Defeating the end times triad: Christian Zionists, Christian nationalists, and techno-fascists. So that seems like a fun one. Here, check this one out. Deny, defend, oppose: health struggle after Luigi. So obviously they've got a hero in Luigi.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Can't miss that one.
Oh,
there is I came across the prison made us militants, a conversation within the belly. How does the work of prison and police abolition fit within a broader socialist movement? How can the left meaningfully engage incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people? How can we build strong movements where imprisoned people are leaders and comrades in the struggle? Because there is a lot that have to do with incarcerated comrades in here. You see it even right here. This one, there's that one. But there's also, this one was a good one. Letter writing to incarcerated comrades. Spend your lunch hour learning the political importance of and best practices for letter writing to prisoners.
This is so good. We need to go next year.
I think we should.
I'm 100% all in. Radical game night. We're going to go radical game night. I want to go to radical game night. Yoga. I want to learn how to write to prisoners to make them communists. I want it all. I want the one about hating the Jews. I want every one of them. I want to see them all.
There's another one: survival and resistance behind bars. The session will discuss the organizing and survival strategies that the panelists practice to stay alive, maintain hope, and fight for freedom and liberation from behind bars, and with co-strugglers on the outside. So, like, is this like a narrative for the socialists, that they're just like, socialists are being rounded up, communists are being rounded up and thrown in jail? So, like, they're under the impression that jails are just filled with like communists and socialists that are political prisoners or something. I just don't get it.
I think what they're trying to suggest maybe is that this is an area where they've done a lot of recruiting. Like, they've been trying to get people to be who are in prison. They're trying to convince them to be like, they didn't go in as socialists. They're there. And now they're going to try to make them socialists while they're in prison. And if that's the case, I mean, either way of looking at it is super interesting. I mean, are they, because again, like, you're right. Do they think there are a lot of communists that just have been unjustly put in prison, which I think would just be so fascinating if they believe that? It's totally absurd. Of course, that's not the case. And number two, or if they are like trying to convert all these people to socialism, how is that going? I mean, it seems like it's going well, but is that really the case? Because that's incredible.
Can we possibly miss DIY abortion?
Oh my God.
As abortion becomes increasingly restricted, what options still remain available? Join us to learn.
Is that even legal?
Oh, I don't know. There's a lot in here that I actually don't know if it's legal or not, but they like, and you'll see some of the clips that I'll play. You could actually, I went back and compared them to like the description that are on here. And they downplay it. They downplay it in the description. When they're actually talking on stage and there's, fewer eyes, on them or whatever, they're a little bit more just outspoken of their beliefs. This is downplaying it. There was another one. This one's kind of goofy. Reclaiming the future, outer space as a site of organizing and imagination. So it's the idea that, like, oh, we can't just worry about the world Earth. We gotta bring socialism into the stars. It's an actual real one in there. So, jam-packed though. I mean, look at this. This is a schedule for 4 days. It just goes on and on and on.
Is this online? Like, are all these sessions online?
I don't know. I'm not sure if we can necessarily find
They
them.
can't be, right?
So, all right.
This is incredible. This is better
I,
than I would have thought.
I'm gonna reset my screen share because we really have to have audio for these things, and I got an error message about audio, so I'm gonna reset it. But yeah,
amazing.
Justin, like seriously, they do this every
year, right?
every year in Chicago, I believe. At least for the past few years, they've always done it in Chicago. So
that's amazing. We gotta go.
I'm wondering, summer of 2026.
We have to do this.
I think
See,
I just got to put on some like glasses or something like that.
I can't wear this hat. I'll tell you that right now.
No, you can't do that.
Got to take this hat off. I feel like like what makes this thing so incredible is, well, hey, I mean, I have so many questions. I would love to know how many people are there. I know that there's a fair number of people.
Oh,
it's not like small.
I've seen some articles suggesting that a couple thousand people show up to this conference.
I mean, gosh, we have to do this, and we got to make it count because we might only get one chance.
Yeah.
Like next time there might be like wanted posters of our faces up. So we get one shot and we got to make it count. But man, I mean, it's so funny, right? Because the right just doesn't take these people seriously. So we don't even pay attention to these things.
Sure.
But we should, because these people have a lot more influence and power than a lot of people realize. And I mean, the whole Zoran Mamdani crowd, that's the same people. Like, people don't understand that. Isn't this a DSA conference?
Well, yes, they are sponsored. They do sponsor it, but like a million organizations sponsor it.
But DSA is the biggest one, so
I'm sure it is. Here, let me show you this is in their like code of conduct. Do you see this here? This is their COVID-19 precautions. So in it says that masks, attendees are required to wear a mask, N94 or N95 or a K95 over their mouth and nose while indoors at the conference. Masks will be provided for those who do not have a mask. Please note this requirement applies only to formal conference spaces and sessions. Attendees should be aware of the possibility that attendees will be unmasked elsewhere in the conference hotel or beyond, where they may informally congregate. So 5 years after the COVID pandemic, you still have to wear a mask when you go to these socialists.
So that's amazing though, because you're telling me that in like one of the bigger meetings where there might be like 1,000 people or something, everyone's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
This has got to be the only place in all of America, right? Can you think of a single other place where you might have 1,000 people all wearing a mask in one place? I don't think so. Not sporting events or anything like that. This has got to be the only place.
All right.
This is a spectacle. This is unbelievable.
So let's get to our videos here. All right. So first off, Justin, I'm just going to play 1 second. Can you hear this? Did you hear that?
No.
You didn't
hear that? No.
You can't hear any of that?
Nope. Did you share the tab?
Yeah, I did. All right, you go on and talk for a minute. We have to have these clips.
Yeah, we gotta have it. Try removing the. Let's remove this from the screen. But yeah, but look, the thing about all these conferences that I think the reason why they matter is it's not just to point out like how crazy the left has become and how crazy socialists have become. It's also to point out that these are massive organizing events, and local elections and even some state congressional elections and stuff like that are now being shaped largely by these people. Like AOC was a DSA candidate. Like a lot of the members of the squad were somewhat backed by the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. Mamdani in New York is basically won because of the DSA, the primary. I can hear that. Yeah. And so it's just like, this matters because they're the most active people, and the most active people often are the ones that are able to get enough supporters together so that they can win these primaries. And then if you win a primary for a Democratic Party nomination or something in a state that's really blue, or a district that's really blue, or a city that's really blue, that's most often, 9 times out of 10, the candidate, or 99 out of 100 times probably, is the candidate that's going to win. And they've figured this out. And so, like, this really does matter. The mayor of New York City very likely will be one of these people, like a person that fits in with this crowd. Yeah. AOC is going to run for president almost certainly. Like, it
and
matters.
Like Elizabeth Warren, going up with Mom Donnie and being like, this guy is great. It's like, for a lot of, I'll just paint with a broad brush here and just talk about like political animal in general. It's like, what comes first is your electability. What comes second is like the things you stand behind, So if like it seems feasible that these people could win elections, that's the most important thing to the Democratic machine. Right. So, all right, let's go with this first clip here. So this one, okay, I originally said that this was going to be the most insane clip, but I think the most insane clip will be the last one that I have for us. But we're starting off hot with this one, okay? So I'll also note that this one in particular, despite the rhetoric of it being completely in line with like the panels and the messaging we already covered, this might have been recorded at like a sister event or maybe a previous conference, because I've seen some conflicting info on this. Some people that are attributing this clip to the latest conference, others suggesting that it happened at some other thing. But regardless, it fits in line with it, and it's just too insane not to share. So this is University of Minnesota liberal arts professor Melanie Yazzie giving her worldview. So let's go ahead and listen to this for a minute or so. Justin, if you want to jump in, I'll pause it and let you comment. So here we go.
Of all liberation struggles and the movements that seek a world of justice, equality, and peace, that seek to dismantle the United States, I hope you seek to dismantle the United States. And if that isn't your politics, okay. I speak as if everybody has this commitment. And the thing is that you should listen to Indigenous people when they're telling you that this is the goal. And that not only is this the goal, but this is the starting point. Because I think Nick articulated this very clearly. Decolonization is the only thing that is going to save us as a species. It's the only thing that's going to save us as a planet. And everyone should just be on board with it. No questions asked.
No questions asked.
And I say this sometimes on the podcast, our Red Nation podcast, I'm the co-host of Red Power Hour. Like, of the most oppressed ass people in Turtle Island, Indigenous women are like on the top of that fucking list, okay? And incarcerated at higher numbers, murdered at higher numbers, missing at higher numbers, higher levels of rape and all kinds of sexual violence and sexual harassment. I mean, Indigenous women struggle so hard under the settler regime that is the United States, and the way that heteropatriarchy ties so closely into that. Mm-hmm. And if an Indigenous woman is telling you that decolonization is the solution, and also that there is real hope, and that Palestine offers us, we said this in the speech, Palestine is the alternative path for Native nations. And this is because we understand Palestine, and the liberation of Palestine is the tip of the spear, right? It is a righteous struggle, and it is so powerful that it has literally, in 60 days, changed the entire world. The entire world has changed. I knew it the moment that it happened, that nothing, and I mean nothing, for colonizers or for any of the good, humble people of the earth would be the same ever again. And we need to lean into that. Lean into the fact that colonizers are scared. Lean in to scaring them and making them feel uncomfortable.
Did Kamala Harris jump on stage or something?
Right? It is because we have power.
Is she suggesting that October 7th is like a good thing? That seems to be what she's suggesting there. That's
come on, dismantling the United States, and no questions asked. Just get on board. If she's saying it, get on board. No questions asked.
Wow, that's
like
incredible.
Honestly, anyone that like thinks that that's like a sympathetic position, that's just like we should totally deconstruct the United States. Don't even ask questions.
She said decolonize. What does that even mean?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, taken most literally, decolonize from the perspective of a Native American woman, who she made very clear that's her perspective, Would that mean everybody but the Native Americans have to leave from the river to the sea? You know,
yeah.
the reservations will be free. I mean, that's what it seems like
no,
to
actually,
me, right?
there was another panel. I forgot to mention this one. There was another panel called "From the River to the World." So maybe that's what she's talking
That's
about.
kind of what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. The vibe I'm getting from her is like, we basically need to just. I mean, she very plainly said we need to dismantle the United States. So, I mean,
Right.
I don't know that there's anything more radical than just saying that. That's pretty crazy. That
Yeah.
is pretty crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So that's the first clip I have for you.
Nice lady.
The next one that I have for you is that Brian Bean gentleman that I mentioned before.
Oh,
He
wow. He
was
looks great.
Yeah, he was on that panel. This was the de-escalation one, but he also did another panel. What was another panel? I think I wrote it down. He did another panel of Their End is Our Beginning, Cops, Capitalism, and Abolition, where he talked about the abolition of police. So let's see if we can hear this gentleman talking.
And I think it's important to say the state isn't democratic. Like, we don't live in a democracy. We should start saying that more so. I mean, there's so many different ways. I'm not going to go into it, but people are clapping. So there's general agreement. I'm glad we agree on that. So do we capture the state, or do we try to replace it with something different? I think it's the latter, to replace it with something different.
Yeah. So there you go. Let's just dismantle the whole thing, replace it with something. This isn't about incremental change, and
No.
we need to start that grassroots and get our socialist people at the local level, and then eventually they can become senators, representatives, eventually, leading the whole country as a president or something. Now that's too slow. We don't want to we don't want to capture the state. We want to replace it with something different. Like, that's pretty close to, like you said, like certain unlawful things, right? I don't want to necessarily accuse them of something here, but that's toeing that line. What do you think?
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. That's 2 in a row that I've said basically that. So that's not great. And by the way, I mean, anybody who's read Communist Manifesto knows that, like, that's what the Marxist view is. I mean, it pretty much is that you replace the existing idea of, the existing models of state. You replace it with something totally different. That's very Marxist. So it's not really outside the line. I mean, it shouldn't surprise people. I just think that there's this weird benefit of the doubt that Americans want to give to socialists in the same way they give to, like, everybody else, where it's just like, my benefit of the doubt is, well, they might have some crazy ideas, but they're not like that crazy, like that's your natural instinct, is to want to try to, like, moderate everything a little bit and say, nah, they're not that bad. It's like, no, they're literally saying that they want to destroy the country.
Right.
And they're also saying, like the first woman that you played, they should take us seriously when we say this, like, or something. She said something to that effect of, I'm saying this, like, seriously, we should start taking this idea seriously, that, we need to, and then she goes on to talk about how they need to deconstruct everything. And then most people, despite the fact that they're literally saying this out in the open and putting it on the internet, everyone still is like, oh, well, no, they're not that. Surely they're not that crazy. It's like, no, they are.
Yeah,
like, just take them seriously.
I've always thought this with, like, Donald Trump, and anytime he does, like, any media, and especially in his first, like, term, and when he was running for president, it was just like, how much of a white supremacist are you? How much of a nationalist are you? Like, trying to see, like, what's the end limit, of what that is. And it's just like, is there any similar treatment of, like, AOC? Like, how much of a socialist really are you? Like, are you for, like, the government kind of just nationalizing, whole industries or whatever? Like, do you want them to take over all the means of production? Like, has there been any NBC reporters that have asked AOC that question? I really don't think so. So yeah, that's kind of to your point, Justin. This one I think you're going to almost take personally. So this is what we've got here is a high school teacher from Wisconsin. talking about how socialists need to do more to radicalize students in high school. Her words, not mine. Here we go.
I'm Tina. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. Lifetime member of the Teaching Assistants Association, which is an AFT. I'm also a lead steward in the Madison Teachers Incorporated because I left higher education and work in a high school now. So everyone who raised your hand and said that you got radicalized in college, imagine if you got radicalized 4 years earlier. Okay. There's a dialectic between these organizations, but there.
She kind of rambles, but she basically talks about the need to radicalize people with these ideas in high school, like she just said. Imagine if you got radicalized, 4 years earlier than in college, and talks about how the DSA and other socialist groups should do more. Just your own community, you individually should do more to engage the teachers to push this rhetoric on their students, high school teachers to push socialist rhetoric onto their students. So she basically describes that for like 3 whole minutes, but that's essentially her take there. What are your thoughts, Justin?
It's like, again, it's one of those things where I think that people who are not super politically aware sometimes treat conservatives like we're crazy for saying that the other side is like really crazy and talking about them like they're these crazy radicals and it's just like, if you actually took them, so we take them more seriously than the people who think that they're being nice are willing to take them. Right. Like, we actually listen to what they have to say and take them at their word. And we notice how we're not putting words in their mouth or anything like that. We're just showing you, here, look, this is what these people are saying. And then it's like, but then when we take it seriously, sometimes our side is treated like the crazy people, right, because we actually listen to what they said and we believe them.
Right.
And
We listen to what they say. We read the papers released by the World Economic Forum. Like, we listen to Davos. And we're crazy.
We listen to them. We listen to
what
them.
They say.
Exactly. And so many people in the middle, the quote unquote middle, like, they won't even listen. They don't even take the time to listen to these people. And then they just talk about us like we're these insane right wingers who just think everything's a communist conspiracy and whatever. And it's like, no, I understand there's a lot of people who are on the left who are not like these people. I get it. But you can't tell me that these people are a big part of it. And you can't tell me that they're not. They're like the most active part of the left.
Right.
And I'm not
organizers. They're the ones that are going door.
They're the people in the rally.
They're recruiting more people. Yeah.
Yeah. They're the ones who are they're everywhere. They're going to prisons. They're writing letters to people in prison trying to get them to be. These are like the evangelists of the left, and they're the most active group of that. And we look at them and say, just like with Black Lives Matters. I mean, this was a huge part of Black Lives Matters. The regular people were so quick to be like, yup, Black Lives Matters. Like, this is a legitimate thing. But then if you actually took the time to read what they wrote on the official Black Lives Matters organizational documents, websites, look into who these people are, look at the interviews they did. You and I took it more seriously than a lot of the people who were like pro Black Lives Matters. They didn't even take it seriously. They didn't even look at them. They didn't read what they had to say. They didn't take them. They just didn't care enough to do that. I cared enough to say, what do these people actually believe? And then when they talked about deconstructing the family unit, and they had that weird socialist Christmas thing they did that one time, and like their organizers were all trained Marxist people at the top.
Remember the Black Lives Matter Chicago, official Black Lives Matter Chicago Twitter celebrated the attack on Israel, the October.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, we took it seriously. We read their writings. We saw they were Marxists. They talked about being Marxists. They said they were trained in that school of thinking. They put it on their websites that this is what they believe. It was all out there for anyone to see. But we took it seriously. We said that. And then we were the crazy people. People like us were deemed the crazy people, or who hate Black people, because we're just literally quoting back what these people are saying. And it's like, I think that the thing that the thing that has happened on the in sort of the American political landscape is the left, especially in my opinion, and they would say this about the right, but like whatever, let's just focus on the left for right now. The left, at the bare minimum, has become so radical that it's moved beyond what regular people think is possible to be true. They just don't think it's possible that they could be as radical as they are. And because they never see it, and it's presented to them by mainstream media as these people are not radical, or they don't even talk about it. Like in the case of DSA, they're just ignored typically by the mainstream media. It's like we must be lying to say these things are true, because how can they possibly be true? It just can't be. It can't be true that there are all these thousands of people that believe this, and that they're electing people, and that those people end up in Congress or running New York City. And like, that can't be true. They can't be as bad as we say. We must be making it up. And it's like, but we're not. We're just playing the clips and reading what they have to say and taking it seriously. And I think it's such a huge problem.
I've got one more clip for you, Justin. You talked about the idea of destructing the family as an example of just how crazy these people can get. This is a montage from a panel called "The Left and the Family: A Roundtable," and this relates directly to the idea of abolishing the family. So this is a 2-minute kind of montage of how this panel went down. So take a look at this one.
On that revolutionary horizon, want to perform abortions in a church, before it's all said and done.
That the only real difference between marriage and prostitution is the price and the duration of the contract.
We can fight for family abolition. We can imagine family abolition because we have seen Black women do it, because we have seen these like indigenous communities do it.
But to me it is the institution of marriage can only exist alongside the criminalization of sex workers.
Children whose parents are unable to provide either housing, food, or safety are treated as if they have committed a crime. So kids themselves are treated as if they have committed a crime if they're not born into a family that can support them.
In addition to abolition of family policing, you argue for abolition of the family in general, and say that the institution of the family acts as part of the carceral system in the way that it reinforces children as property.
I think the left is constantly surprised at how few people are, ready for revolt, despite, the extremely dire conditions that we're in that keep becoming more and more
So dire.
every day.
Women and children are the most harmed by capitalism, but also women and children are the architects of their fate.
So when we talk about family abolition, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the abolition of that economic unit. For me, that liberatory horizon.
They're basically quoting
is a
Marx, by the way.
horizon
Oh, yeah.
Throughout much of this.
and care are in which all of our material needs are taken care of by the collective.
That's right. All of our material needs are taken care of by the collective. You don't need a family.
Sex work, the criminalization of sex work is like the dark underbelly of the sanctified, reified, and legally like enforced institution of exchanging your bodily autonomy and your sexuality for economic security. I don't think one can exist without the other.
Yeah, abolish the family, Justin. Abolish the family. Yes, I know this was in the Communist Manifesto, but hearing it in 2025, it's like there's a reason why they lead off with like "Workers of the World Unite" and not "Abolish the family" as like a rallying cry. I'm floored because I come from the perspective that like the nuclear family, the family unit is like the strongest, most important kind of like a unit for a society. And this is like the complete opposite. It's like, no, that's actually fomenting capitalism, and that's fomenting, exploitation of all of that stuff. And we have to get rid of it. Like, that's like I can't even like start to go down the rabbit hole of implications of that, and who's in control, who allows people to even have children, what happens when you have a child, all of that stuff. It just like is so repulsive to me. I don't even know if I can like speak
So
publicly
sickening.
about it.
It's so sickening. And the thing that is interesting about Marxist thinking throughout the century and a half or so, where it's been really prominent, is that you learn pretty quickly when you're reading Marx and the early Marxist, and then the people echoing it, all the way up to this person right here, these people in this conference. They're conspiracy theorists, and they are conspiracy theorists who believe that the reason that people have that basically everybody has the same belief about certain kind of like what you would consider to be fundamental truths about humanity, like family is good and sex workers probably not a good thing and stuff like that, is that it's the outflow of this gigantic capitalist structure that fooled you into thinking that these things are good. Like, it's a trick. You've been tricked into believing that religion is like a real thing, the family is a real thing, that these are good things that are natural. Actually, they're not natural, and it's just been imposed on you, this way of thinking. You're basically the product of all this propaganda. And it denies the fact that, I mean, it's just so patently false because of how universal all these ideas are across the entire history of human civilization. In every kind of culture, before we even had what you would call capitalism, you had family units where everybody believed that was a good thing. Even outside of in every culture of all time, that was a thing. It wasn't like you can't find me an example of a culture ever that was like, the family, screw that. Everybody lives solo in our culture. Like, we don't care about family and kids. Like, nobody ever thought that, ever. It's not a capitalist, it's not some sort of capitalism driven thing. Like, that was true 10,000 years ago. Like, what are you talking about? It's so ingrained in human nature. A lot of the beliefs that are common is it's an outflow of human nature. That's the reason we all kind of agree that murder is bad, and that stealing is bad, and that having kids is good. This is just human nature. Like, that's what humans all believe because it's part of who we are. And they refuse to acknowledge that these basic truths about human nature. They just refuse to acknowledge them, as though they're all just figments of our imagination. And they're the only enlightened ones who have managed to basically take the red pill and break out of the matrix to realize that, oh no, actually, there's no difference between marriage and prostitution. It's all basically the same thing. And kids, that the only reason you feel like you need to have kids is because of some ridiculous setup in society, and capitalism is to blame, and you don't even really need that. And it's like, you have to deny so many. What's so funny is they're the first ones to say we have to listen to everybody's experiences, and we have to, put value on personal experience and what everybody's own personal truth is, and all this stuff. They love to say that kind of thing. But for literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years, everyone agreed that these people and the things they're saying right now are wrong. And so why should I or anyone else think that think of how dismissive they're being of all the billions of people that have lived and not agreed with their view of things. And they're basically saying these people are all idiots who have been indoctrinated and they don't know what they're talking about. And it's like, that's across all kinds of cultures and religions and, times and that's everything. It's like, how insane and egotistical do you have to be to say that I know better than basically 99.99999% of people who have ever lived everywhere forever? Well, that's insane.
But that's why this all requires the re-education camps. That's why it all requires the construction of the new Soviet man. All of these things is to is to basically like reprogram the human mind to fit in line with this worldview. That's why all those things exist. That's why all of those things are part and parcel of any real attempt to have some sort of, communist paradise. All of that requires
at some point we should
recoding
bring
of the human brain.
At some point we should bring up that then in a future episode, go back to the Leon Trotsky superhuman
Absolutely.
Thing. Leon Trotsky, of course, one of the masterminds behind the Soviet Revolution and the communist birth of communism really throughout the whole world, but in Russia in particular. And he wrote very specifically about this issue of human nature and the need for human beings to actually change and evolve so that they could be a communist. He almost acknowledged that the current version of humanity is not really built for communism, but he seemed to think that humans could evolve if they were liberated from the shackles of capitalism. They would be able to evolve further to change, essentially changing their human nature to be more so that communism could exist, because it can't exist under the normal version of human nature. And it's an incredible
we should do a deep dive into that. We have to,
great,
because I remember we talked about that before, and then we talked about it again in like the context of emerging technology and everything, and it like blew my mind. So yeah, we'll have to do that in a future episode. But we're already at like an hour and a half, way long. We actually cut a topic that we were going to talk about on this episode because we knew we weren't going to have enough time. I didn't realize we were going to have to cut two things to fit under an hour, but regardless, hopefully it was an entertaining episode. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Justin and Donald Save America. If you like this show, please leave a review on whatever platform that you're watching this on. If you are watching it on YouTube or something, then just subscribe to it. Hit that like button, share this content, even leaving a comment under the video. All helps break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. If you'd like to see more of our work, you could always go to stoppingsocialism.com. You can check out the clips on Stopping Socialism TV. Justin, where can the people find more of your work?
At Justin T. Haskins on Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter anymore. X. And basically all the other social media. I use the same handle for everything. And then you could also go to justinhaskins.com.
Fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.